July 20th, 1969. After years of training, billions of dollars of investment, and a journey of thousands miles through space, a human being stepped onto the surface of Moon for the very first time in history. And what did he say? That is one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Now, Armstrong always maintained, he said, one small step for a man, though the word "a" was not clearly heard in transmission. Either way, calling a moon landing a small step is perhaps the greatest understatement ever spoken in human history. Welcome back. Today we are covering understatement. Pronunciation first, and this one is refreshingly straightforward. Understatement. Stress falls on the very first syllable. Un. Say it with me. Understatement. Today we will cover the definition and key features of understatement, real verified examples from literature and everyday English, how understatement connects to Litotes, a fill-in-the-blank quiz with a reverse challenge, and where understatement appears in real life. Let's begin. Imagine someone's car has been completely crushed by a falling tree. They look at the wreckage and say, "Well, that's a little inconvenient." Or you show someone Nigeria Falls for the first time and they say, "That is quite a lot of water." That deliberate gap between how enormous something actually is and how calmly and mildly it is described, that gap is understatement. It is the art of saying far less than you mean. Understatement is not randomly used. Every time a writer or speaker uses it, they are doing so for a specific purpose. That purpose is one of the four things: humor, modesty, irony, or dramatic contrast. Understanding which purpose is served helps you analyze understatement properly. Three key features every understatement must have. Feature 1. Deliberateness. An understatement is always intentional. The speaker is not confused about how serious something is. They know it perfectly well and yet they choose to describe it mildly. This is what separates understatement from simply being wrong or ignorant about something. Feature 2. The gap. There must be a clear and noticeable gap between what is actually happening and how it is being described. Think of it like a volume dial. The reality is at 10, loud, dramatic, and significant. The understatement turns the dial down to 2. The bigger the gap between 10 and 2, the stronger the understatement. Calling a hurricane a bit of a wind is stronger understatement than calling heavy rain slightly damp because the gap is much larger. Feature 3. Effect. Every understatement creates a specific effect on the audience. If you cannot identify what effect the understatement is creating, ask yourself what the gap between reality and description makes you feel. Does it make you laugh? That is humor. Does it make you respect the speaker's modesty? That is modesty. Does it make the reality feel even heavier because it is described so lightly? That is irony or dramatic contrast. Here is the formula. Take something significant and describe it with language that is dramatically too calm, too small, or too mild for what it actually is. For example, the reality is the Titanic, one of the greatest maritime disasters in human history, sank on its maiden voyage. Understatement will be, the Titanic had a bit of problem on its maiden voyage. The gap between that catastrophic historical reality and the paraphrase of a bit of problem, that gap is the understatement. Notice, no death toll mentioned, just a sheer scale of gap between maritime disaster and a bit of problem. It is understatement. Now let's look at verified examples of understatement from literature. These are all confirmed direct quotation from their sources, and they show how the greatest writers in English used understatement as a deliberate artistic tool. First, William Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, Act 3, Scene 1. Mercutio has just been fatally stabbed by Tybalt. He is dying. And what does he say? "'Tis not so deep as a well, nor so wide as church door, but 'tis enough. 'Twill serve." He is describing his own fatal wound as merely enough. Not devastating, not tragic, just enough. That single word "enough" to describe a mortal wound is one of the most devastating understatements in all of the English literature. Second example, Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, 1813. Jane Bennet has fallen seriously ill. Her mother, Miss Bennet, who has a tendency to be dramatically over-emotional about everything, makes this remarkable statement about the illness. "Do not die of little trifling colds," a serious illness described as a literal trifling cold. Austen uses this understatement brilliantly. Coming from Miss Bennet, it creates both humor and irony simultaneously. The reader knows the illness is serious, and the dismissive understatement makes the comedy land perfectly. The example we are going to discuss now is extraordinary. Jonathan Swift, 1729. Swift was furious about the poverty and suffering of Irish people under British rule. He decided to make his point through the most savage piece of writing in English language. He wrote a proposal, suggesting that Irish people should solve their poverty by selling their babies as food for wealthy people. And he called this proposal a modest proposal. The full title, "A Modest Proposal for Preventing the Children of Poor People from Being a Burden to Their Parents or Country." Modest. He called proposing to eat babies modest. The entire title of this work is one of the most furiously powerful understatements in the history of English literature. The gap between horrifying content and the word modest is enormous, and that gap is entire point. Now, understatement is not only found in literature, it surrounds us in everyday English, particularly in British English where it is practically a cultural art form. Someone's car has been completely crushed by a falling tree. They look at the wreckage and say that it's a bit unfortunate. The complete destruction of a vehicle described as a bit unfortunate, the gap between catastrophic damage and a bit of problem is enormous, and that gap creates instant humor. Someone has just run a full marathon, 26.2 miles. They cross the finish line exhausted and barely standing. They manage to say, "That was a little tiring." Running 26.2 miles described as a little tiring. Classic understatement. The humor comes entirely from the obvious inadequacy of the description. Now, an important connection that will strengthen your understanding of both understatement and a figure of speech that we have already covered in this series, litotes. Many students confuse these two or use them interchangeably. They are related, but they are not the same thing. Here's the relationship. Understatement is the broad category. It covers any deliberate downplaying of something significant, whereas litotes is a specific type of understatement, but it has one additional requirement. Litotes specifically uses a negative impression to convey a positive meaning. For example, not bad means good. Not the easiest task means very difficult. The negation, the not, it is what defines litotes. Without the negation, it is understatement but not litotes. If you want a complete lesson on litotes, I have already covered it in detail in this series. The link is in the description and in the playlist. Now it's quiz time. This is a fill-in-the-blank quiz with a twist. For questions 1 and 2, I'll give you a dramatic situation and the beginning of an understatement. You will complete it. For question 3, I'll reverse it. I'll give you the understatement and you'll tell me what the real situation probably was. Ready? Let's go. Question 1. You have just climbed Mount Everest, the highest mountains on the earth at 8,849 meters. Weeks of dangerous, exhausting climbing through extreme weather and altitude. You reach the summit. Someone asks, how was the climb? Complete this understatement. Here are suggested answers. It was a bit of walk. It was mildly challenging. It was not entirely effortless. And notice that last one is also Litotes since it uses negotiation. All three work as understatements. The key is the gap between the enormous dangerous reality and the laughable mild description. If your answer created that gap, you got it right. Question 2. Your friend has just eaten the spiciest food they have ever encountered in their life. Their face is bright red, their eyes are streaming. They are fanning their mouth and barely able to speak. They manage to say, suggested answers. That was a little warm, that had a slight kick to it, that was not entirely mild. All three create the same gap between obvious physical agony and the laughably calm description. Pure understatement for humor. If you come up with something even more creative, drop it in the comments. Question 3. The reverse challenge. This time I'll give you the understatement and you'll tell me what the real situation probably was. Here it is. Someone says, I had a somewhat difficult childhood. What does this understatement suggest about the real situation? Pause and think carefully. The understatement, somewhat difficult childhood suggests that reality was likely a very painful, traumatic, or deeply challenging upbringing. The speaker is not using understatement for humor here. They are using it for emotional protection, to describe something deeply painful in language that is bearable to say out loud. This is one of the most human uses of understatement. It shows us that understatement is not always about comedy. Sometimes it is about survival. How did you do? Drop your most creative answers for question 1 and 2 in the comments. I want to see what you came up with. And if question 3 made you think differently about understatement, that was exactly my point. Before we wrap up, let me show you the 4 main areas where understatement appears in the real life. Once you know these, you will spot it everywhere. Area 1. British culture. Understatement is so deeply embedded in British communication that it has become a cultural trademark. The British tendency to describe disasters as a bit unfortunate or excruciating pain as not entirely comfortable is recognized worldwide. If you are studying or working with British English, understanding understatement is not optional, it is essential. Area 2. Literature. As we saw today, Shakespeare, Austen and Swift all used understatement masterfully for different purposes. When you read English literature and notice something feels oddly calm or mild given the circumstances, look for understatement. It is almost always there intentionally. Area 3. Everyday humor. Understatement is one of the most reliable tools for comedy in everyday speech. The gap between catastrophic reality and calm mind description is inherently funny, and that is why understatement is the cornerstone of both British comedy and dry humor worldwide. Area 4. Professional and diplomatic language. In professional settings, understatement softens criticism and maintains relationships. A manager saying, your report needs a little work, when the report needs complete rewriting. A doctor saying, this might be slightly uncomfortable, when the procedure will be painful. Understatement keeps professional relationships intact and prevents conflict. Final recap. Understatement deliberately describes something as far less significant than it really is. Three key features: always deliberate, always has a clear gap between reality and description, and always creates a specific effect. It is different from Litotes in that Litotes is a specific type of understatement that uses negotiation, and it appears in British culture, literature, humor, and professional life all around us every single day. If this video helped you, give it a thumbs up. Can you think of a euphemism you use in everyday life? Drop it in the comments. I will reply to everyone. Subscribe if you have not already because we are covering every single figure of speech one by one. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video. Keep learning and keep growing.